And wonderful. So I just, point of order, I'm going to mute everybody, and speakers, just unmute yourself. And if we're trying to keep it to about 5 minutes per presentation, you don't have to go full 5 minutes. If it's a little bit shorter and people have questions, please type your questions into the chat box, and if we have time, we'll call on somebody, and then you can unmute yourself and ask your question. I recommend for this type of thing, if in the upper right hand corner, if you go to speaker view, that way you have a bigger picture of the speaker rather than trying to find the speaker in all the little boxes, but it is completely up to you. And you do not have to have yourself on screen if you don't want. You can just listen. There. So welcome to City of Learning. I'm Jeff Albert. My pronouns are he, him, and from Pacific Oaks College Center for Community and Social Impact. And I'd like to welcome everybody to our first virtual City of Learning. And so the mission of Pasadena City of Learning is to create an environment in our community that supports lifelong learning for all, based on community's existing strengths and new civic participation and innovative collaborations. Today's meeting came out of discussion as in our group about checking in to find out how all of you are doing, how our institutions are doing with the COVID closures, because it's changed a lot of the way we do business. And as an offshoot of that is hearing stories about some of the innovative ways that you've been compensating for needing to either work remotely or change the way you're working, and really interested in hearing and sharing some of the methods that you have started using that you may continue using as we become less isolated in the future, as we go back to a more social situation. And maybe this is something that, you know, we can learn from each other and apply to the work we're doing. So thank you all. And let me go to mute all, and I'll allow participants to unmute themselves. And so first up, we have Chief Perez from Pasadena Police Department. I'd love to hear from you, Chief.
All right, can you guys all hear me well?
Perfect.
Good, all right, good. So I start off this morning, and I appreciate the forum and seeing everybody today. It's absolutely amazing at what our city manager and our health officer are experiencing every day in running a community like we have. We're not a small bedroom city. We have a population of close to 150,000. During the day, it probably surpasses $250,000. Lately, that's not been the case. But when you have a center for people to come in vacation, commerce, business, and we still deal with a lot of social issues like the history of gang and violence. It is a real city in many, many ways. It's a big city that's been, you know, shrunk in a dryer when you wash something and put it in there. And it really is a city that moves faster than its size really defines. So for us, I'm thankful for them. We've all lost friends. I've lost a couple through this COVID, and we take a moment to really think about them and the fact that their families are suffering, and I'm trying to plan a funeral for one of our retired officers and see how that's going to look. And so it's difficult. So when I get to the point of this here, I just wanted to put that aside. Our police department, we've changed a lot. Back in February and March, we saw some of these issues coming. We ordered a lot of equipment early with face masks. And in early March, we began to put in a lot of different protocols. These field protocols began changing almost daily, if not weekly. And it was important for our people to be trained up on how to put on masks, how to put on protective equipment, how we enter skilled nursing facilities. We got to a point where we just couldn't go in no more. And the officers were still going into these facilities with their protective gear on. But we got to a point we had to stay outside and just wait. And our partnership with the health department and the fire department has been fantastic. That's helped us through this. We haven't had anybody had a positive exposure here in the police department, which is good. When you consider the fact crime initially dropped by 30%, Our calls for service dropped by 15% in the first few weeks of March as we were adjusting. I went different from most police departments, even though it was dropping. Most police departments had let their detectives go home and lighten the field crew out in the street to make it easier for them. What I did is go in reverse. We put more police officers out in the street, and then we had our detectives still work on the weekends and during the week to make sure we were giving great service to our community and trying to get to some of these issues. We created phone taking centers for our police officers, so they take phone calls over the telephone and write down some of these reports instead of going face to face with people. That was helpful. By early April, it changed. Even though we were changing our protocols and we were doing a very good job, and I think we were a regional model for a lot of agencies, we saw crime go up. Crime has now gone up. That 30% drop is gone. We were up 4% at this point than we were last year. We had about a 2-3 week period where we had a couple of dozen assault with deadly weapons. These were not gang incidents. This is what I'm going to put to cabin fever type of events. So I was worried about that. During this time, as crime was increasing, we saw it in assaults, thefts, and stolen cars. We did see, we saw domestic violence dropping, and this is where we became a little innovative in our approach. We teamed up with Peace Over Violence. We put out some press releases. We raised some money for them in terms of $3,500 from the police department. We were able to give them to help create some of that movement. I talked to the other chiefs regionally about trying to put more information out so we could get people to call. And that's really what it was about. And we see it ticking back up. You could look at it as being a negative as it ticks back up. To me, it's something at least we're addressing the issue and it not being quiet. So we also donated a half a ton of food to our shelter here locally. We raised another almost $20,000 from the police department to give to different charities. From different people. So we were trying to give as well as do police work. And I think that's the part of our workplaces we're trying to keep focused, that this is not an end of the world event. We're going to get through this. It's not going to be easy at the end of it. How much of this are we going to keep, and all the changes that we've made? So at the end of the day, in a month and a half, we've already taken 20 guns off the street. That's a problem for me. We're dealing with the violence. We've arrested almost everybody. Our response times have dropped. But inside of that, our community engagement, trying to bring donations to organizations that need it, all that's going to be important. And I'll end on this point. For all the changes that we made, for everything that we are doing, for all of us, the challenge will be to identify what needs to stay. It will be very easy for us to return to the old ways of doing things prior to COVID. The challenge for us is how much of this do we keep to be a better society, a better community, and keep the innovation, the evolution of thought going forward. And I think that is going to be the most difficult part for us. So I'll leave it at that. And I thank you.
Thank you very much, Chief. I really appreciate you coming and sharing with us. All right, so next up we have Juliana Serrano from All Saints.
All right, good morning, everyone. Nice to be with you. Always good to follow the chief. That's always a hard gig. Thanks, John. Well, I think that All Saints Church, just like all of you out there, including the police department, we're just adapting to what is the situation and trying our best to use technology to bring us all together. And so I think one of the newest innovations that have come to our community is online worship. And we're utilizing Zoom just like we're utilizing this meeting, and bringing in people from their homes to participate in our worship service, and getting real creative with bringing musical pieces from our choirs together, and doing now just one online worship service that's in English. We have one service that's also in Spanish, and that is quite different for us in terms of our worship capacity, because when we were physically together, we had 4 worship services every single Sunday. So that is a big change, but we're finding that our numbers aren't changing, which is phenomenal. So we're still having a really wide reach with our online worship services and reaching upwards of 1,000 people a Sunday, which is really fantastic that people are finding community and spirituality through an online worship service, and it's going really great. We've had to change our petition process to online only. So for those of you, and I know there's several All Saints members who are on this Zoom, know that every single Sunday after church, we encourage people to stop by what we call our action table to sign a petition or to send a letter to an elected official. And while that was a kind of an old school model where it was all paper, but very effective in terms of mass mailing letters and petitions to elected officials, that now has all moved digitally as well, so that we can capture people in the moment and make sure that we're still getting people to put their faith into action, at least on a weekly basis. I think one of the other things that we've done that's been new and has been very, very, very beneficial to our community is that we essentially started a phone tree calling initiative. And so right after we got the stay-at-home order, we targeted those members of our community that are ages 75 or more. And we had volunteers reach out to all of those members just to see, how are you doing? Is there anything you need? Is there something that we can help you with? If it was groceries or prescription pickups and that sort of thing, we had a subsequent team of volunteers that were ready to go into action and make those errands for members of the congregation as needed. Once we reached out to everyone who was 75 plus, we reached out to everyone who was 65 to 74, and then that effort extended even more to the LGBTQ community, to those members in our Latino Hispanic ministries, and to those with families in our congregation. So as you can imagine, that's a big group. And in this period of time, we've reached out to more than 2,000 individuals or households, and 70 volunteers have participated in that effort. That has been absolutely wonderful, again, in terms of bringing people together that might not have otherwise known each other, which is really great. We've got lots of folks now who have met each other for the first time as a result of a phone call and are very eager to meet each other in person once we're able to. But it's been a wonderful opportunity for care and community in the All Saints community, and we've learned a lot more about our congregation as a result. And as a result of that, what we are doing now is making plans, preparations for providing ongoing support to people who are in need as a result of this crisis. We know that there's going to be a lot of trauma. There's going to be a lot of employment support that is needed in the weeks and the months to come, financial support, legal support, housing support. So what we're doing now is providing the system by which we can offer ongoing care to members of our communities, linking volunteers who may be experts in these areas to people who are in need through a formal intake process. And so we're really happy to get this started. We already have some people in the pipeline. And one aspect of that work will be what we're calling a companion program, where we literally pair somebody up with a buddy who's able to stick by their side throughout the challenges that they're experiencing at this time. And so we're really excited to get that started and have already been seeing some positive benefits from some people who have signed up for that. And we know that that is going to be something that will grow and expand again in the months to come, that we're just really in the beginning phase of this challenging time. We know that the economic impacts will be coming to us even stronger. And so we wanted to create that infrastructure that we could support people as best as we possibly could. So those are just two things that All Saints is doing differently these days, but we continue to still feed people who are hungry once a week. We are supporting our partners at Learning Works with a food pantry there as well to support those students and families. Supporting our partners at the Pasadena Job Center, who are also in touch with many families in our community who need food and grocery items, and so supporting those efforts and doing the best that we can to influence our elected officials here at the local level and at the state and federal level so that we can get the right kind of policy in place to support people who are vulnerable and marginalized at this time. Thanks.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for the update, Juliana. So next up from Huntington Health Physicians, we have Dr. Tim Albert.
Thanks. Let me see if I can share my screen here. We'll share that. Okay, hopefully everyone can see this.
Yeah.
Huntington Health Physicians is the medical foundation that's part of Huntington Hospital, and we operate many ambulatory clinics in our community. COVID obviously impacted all of us and certainly has had a huge impact on healthcare. When we look at all the different areas that we had to kind of pivot and move quickly, it encompassed how we cared for patients, how we were managing our employees, both the frontline clinical and the support staff, and really how we're handling our process and technology. The one area I want to focus on today is just on telehealth and how we are connecting with our community. This obviously is universal, and that's one of the most striking things about what we're going through is although we're dealing with this differently, we're all experiencing an impact, and this is global, national, down to our communities and our cities. This is a figure from the Commonwealth Fund that shows a dramatic change in clinical in-office activity that occurred in early to mid-March throughout the country. And really what's just most striking is really the sudden drop in in-office visits, averaging around 50% throughout the country and showing it regionally in different areas. We at Huntington were no different, starting in mid-March with the social distancing stay-at-home orders. We took a hard look at what we were doing in the clinic to say what could be deferred, what was critical, and those that could be deferred, we postponed those visits. Well, obviously, we still need to provide health care, so we had to pivot and find another solution. Telehealth has really been a great genie that came out of this bottle here, and it's one that I hope we don't have to put back. It's an area that I've certainly wanted to implement. There's been barriers, a lot of them being at the payer side, not wanting to support it, that reversed very quickly. And I'd have to say that the government agencies responded on a dime within a week or two opening this up. And we saw this dramatic response across the country, where in mid-March, we started to see increases in telehealth activity. Well, this Commonwealth Fund shows nationally around mid-April, almost 30% of visits were done remotely through telehealth. At HHP, we adopted a platform called DoxyMe. This was our virtual health platform. We tried a few different ones and really found this to be most easy to use both by our doctors and our patients. It's nice. It has a virtual waiting room. You get to see a picture of your physician. We can send them a URL link either by text or email. So the patients can just click on that and go right to the room and have this synchronous telehealth visit. Since we implemented this in mid-March, it's really been an amazing success. We went from 0 telehealth visits at the beginning of March to over 1,700 last week. So we're averaging over around 1,500 visits a week with this platform. This is moving us back up to around 60% of normal activity. So still growing, but at least an opportunity to really interact and care for our patients. The take-homes that we're learning, and we're still learning about this technology. I think it's too early. Any technology, there's always a lot of energy, excitement, early adoption, and then you kind of step back and say, well, what's it doing well? What's it not? Kind of have a little list of pros and cons that I'd say. It's certainly supported our current social distancing measures. It's allowed for the continuity of care, especially with chronic disease and some acute care that we need. And it's really exciting to see medicine without walls. We at least can minimize one of the access issues, which is mobility, and the supportive of the social distancing we need now, as well as an access point for those that have difficulty getting in the clinics. So those are positives I see really lasting. Cons, it doesn't reach all our populations. We still need to see kids to come in and babies to get vaccines. I worry about the elderly that can't use this technology adequately, or that we just can't fully assess. I don't think we understand what we're missing yet, but this is certainly a limitation. Also, just the human touch side. And I've spoken with physicians and patients. And one of my physicians said, you know, I miss just being able to have that slight banner when someone walks in and they have a different pair of shoes, and I'll kind of joke with them or talk to them about that. So those are things that telehealth is not going to provide. It provides a different avenue, but it's things that we're going to learn about how we use. So in conclusion for the group, I'd say that telehealth is likely here to stay. I hope it's here to stay. It really has some advantages. It's a great adjunct to clinical care, but it's not the replacement in many cases for what's needed in the office. And I think time's going to tell how it best fits in our care continuum. Lastly, I just like to say that HHP's alive and well, and we're focusing on a restart of our clinic operations on May 18th. Have modified schedules, so more spacing in the office. We have a number of new safety protocols we're doing with screening of staff and patients, but we're gearing to get back into open office business. So thank you.
Thank you very much for the update, Tim. And yeah, so next up we have Alyssa Barrett from Western Justice Center talk to us about what they've been doing.
Hi, everyone. How are you? It's really good to see you. It's such a so inspiring to hear what everyone is doing to support people as we walk through this. As you all may know, we're geared up for our big peer mediation invitational, which brings student peer mediators from more than a dozen schools all around LA County to the Ninth Circuit to learn new skills and to meet other kids like themselves, and for us to support the educators. And that was the week after the stay-at-home order. So like many organizations, we got right into action talking to the teachers and administrators and parents that we're in community with, and hearing about the burden of online learning and how that was affecting them, what that was doing to the kids, to the teachers, what effect it was having now, and what effects they were thinking it was going to have in the fall. And so I'll share my screen for a second, give you a taste of some of what we've done to adapt. So hope everyone can share the screen now. We have updated our mission statement recently, so we empower people to strengthen their communities by growing conflict resolution skills and capacity of youth, educators, schools, and community partners. It is our sincere belief that conflict resolution skills are going to be more necessary than ever. We think people are going to come back into community in schools in the fall, and there are going to be a number of challenges. Kids have been in all kinds of environment. We've having a lot of conversations with educators about kids who are in families where there's been job loss, where there's very limited access to food and medical care. There may be some kids who have had school as their escape from situations of violence and abuse in the home, and now they are not able to have that release from what's happening to them. So there's a lot of concern. Our feeling is that conflict resolution work helps us build inclusive community at schools. We do deep dives into social and emotional learning. We help educators with classroom management skills. We teach people how to use restorative practices, to start peer mediation programs, and to recognize the power of even a small group of students, properly trained and fully supported by adults, to radically change the dynamics in their school environment. And fortunately, we had something called School Tools, which is our online resource curriculum. It's a website that offers a number of things to users. There's the website if you're interested. It has lesson plans, handouts, interactive videos. It's designed for grades 4 through 12. And so the first thing that we did is think, how can we use this tool to support educators who have this huge burden around remote learning and are also very concerned about what is happening emotionally with the kids that they're trying to reach and support. So we designed a webinar series. Our first webinar series was School Tools 101, just how to navigate the site and use the resources there. This week, we're actually starting a second webinar series. It's called Comfort with Conflict, How to Embrace Self-Awareness, as kind of the cornerstone lesson in figuring out, how do I identify what I'm thinking and feeling? How do I get centered? How do I shift myself out of a reactive place into a responsive place so I can show up constructively for conflict and see conflict as an opportunity for transformation and growth rather as something disruptive or aberrant that just has to be punished and people removed from community. We are hearing from educators that there is a huge increase in cyberbullying. We're also hearing about kids bullying each other in the midst of either Crowdcast or Schoolology or Zoom or Google Hangout, whatever the mechanisms for online are, that behavior, kids are kids, and that's not changing. I would love for anybody who is interested in this work to join us. The webinar series is free. Our next sessions are going to be in 2 o'clock this Friday and next Tuesday. It will be taught by our program director and our program coordinator. We also have a special guest. As you all may know, we also run a campus for nonprofits in Pasadena. And one of our community members is Tools for Peace, which specializes in teaching people about mindfulness and meditation. So we'll also have someone who will be guest teaching us. It's really easy to sign up. The other thing that we're going to be doing is, like All Saints, we're doing a lot of listening right now. And thank you for that. And also for Chief Perez, is really, how can we reach out and listen and hear about what is going on for educators, for parents, for students, because we are all hopefully going to be returning to some semblance of in-person learning, even if it's in combination with continued remote learning in the fall. How do we get ready for that? Also, as you all may know, so that's a chance to connect, share, and grow. The first one will be at the end of May on the 29th. If you know people who are interested, we'll hope you join us. And the last thing is that we are continuing our ABCs of Conflict professional development program. Like many folks, we're sort of trying to take the good that's come about through virtual learning and marry that with our more traditional practices. And how do we get to the other side of this and help use these tools to reach and empower more people? Our webinar series already has reached more than 100 educators in nearly 24 schools. It's also touched off conversations with people in other states and even other countries. So we hope if you're interested, they'll be join us. We'll be talking about how to bring conflict resolution education to your school, how to start and run peer mediation programs, how to use restorative circles, how to address bias, bullying, and importantly, trauma. That's a new element that we're going to add to the training. And then how to partner with us in the fall for coaching, on-site training of students, and peer-to-peer support. What we're realizing is that we really need to shift to a model of year-round support for educators. That's the way that we're going to successfully inform, educate, and empower young people to become conflict adept and to be change agents in their school communities, because they have that power with proper support. They gain a sense of agency and confidence. And it's been very exciting for the schools that we are in touch with to see how their peer mediators have kind of stepped into those community leadership roles, and they're reaching out to other students and forming kind of playing the role of a glue in their school community, whether they're graduating, going on to next level of education, or they're going to come back to an elementary, mostly middle and high school in the fall. So thank you so much for letting me share that, and hope if anybody finds that useful, you'll join us for any of the trainings, and it's just a real honor and a pleasure to be part of this community.
Thank you, and I'll be sure to send out links to everything in a follow-up email the next day or two. Next up, we have Melanie Goodyear from Jericho Road, Pasadena.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yep.
Okay, awesome. I wasn't sure if you had muted me or I still was on mute. So thanks everybody, such inspirational adaptations to the world we're in. I think most of you are familiar with Jericho Road, Pasadena. We help nonprofits build their operational capacity by providing pro bono consulting, board placement, board training, and then some convening. Like we work really closely with the Pasadena Executive Roundtable. I'm on the steering committee for that. So our first way of adapting what we did was to say, okay, how do we adapt our ability to find great volunteers and manage them with some immediate needs? So I reached out to some of the nonprofits serving the most affected populations. And so we managed about 15 volunteers to call maybe 600 or 700 of the Pasadena senior centers. I'm going to pull up the chat bar too. The senior center members, so really supporting them in direct service. So normally our volunteers are doing all kind of consulting and capacity building work, but we really thought this was a great moment for us to take that ability to manage volunteers and do some direct service. So like Juliana said, that I think was just such an incredibly rewarding project to do. We also were supporting them with some volunteers doing deliveries and that kind of thing for seniors, and also helping them set up a mutual aid platform. So it's really nice to think that we've been able to pivot our model to really have this very direct impact on seniors. We've continued to do our convening work, so that I think the Pasadena Executive Roundtable continues to be a great place for executive directors to come together. Unlike our usual kind of theme with a presenter and a program, we've had meetings that were more along the lines of like, what the heck is going on? How do we all deal with this together? So hopefully providing some support. And we have actually a meeting on Thursday with Jan Masaoka from Cal Nonprofits presenting, and then we'll have a June meeting as well. So hopefully that continues to be a good platform. And one of the things I was watching is how nonprofits were coming together. So because we are a convener and connector, groups like the Pasadena Partnership for Children, Youth, and Families, really, I think you guys have done an amazing job, and I know several of you are members of that group. Really a fantastic job of coming together and identifying the needs. But then I saw that with the fewer organizations that serve seniors, that wasn't happening. So we convened a call just to coordinate all the folks who are serving seniors, which I think was really helpful to know who's providing what, how those groups could work together. They even worked out a deal to get more toilet paper to seniors, which is, I feel like if there's one outcome of my work in 2020, more toilet paper to seniors should really be high on my list of accomplishments. So as many of you know, we took over planning the annual Pasadena Mayor's Interfaith Prayer Breakfast this year. Really glad we took that over this year. It was already a lot of work, and so thanks to Juliana and some others, we were able to do that as a virtual event, which I think people found very moving. It's online, so it's on the Mayor's Prayer Breakfast Facebook page, YouTube, and Pasadena Media's website. So if anybody needs a moment of inspiration, hopefully that's it. One of the other popular things that we do is a quarterly board training series. So people who are on nonprofit boards can get trained in board basics, which most board members have not been. And this provides us a great opportunity to look at moving that online. So I think that we're going to look at doing that this year. And I think nonprofits are really going to need strong leadership this year. So I think that particular program is going to be more relevant than ever. And I wondered if that program would kind of screech to a halt during the pandemic. I found the opposite. We've actually had more people coming to us saying, I would love to support nonprofits right now. How can I get involved in that? So we're actually placing more board members than we had kind of in the past 6 or 7 months, which is exciting. And then I think we're looking at how much pro bono will continue to be relevant to nonprofits, and particularly looking at things like increasing the number, for example, IT infrastructure volunteers that we have. So we're really going to be looking at that and helping nonprofits up their IT game. Again, looking at board training and board development, so nonprofits have good leaders through a very, very difficult time for many nonprofits. Strategic planning and what that means when we need to do that in a very adaptable way, so maybe some scenario planning and that kind of thing. So I think that again, I think we've seen a little bit of an uptick in pro bono requests. It's going to take us a little longer to get some of those folks in place. But I think looking at, even we have a bunch of, for example, great finance volunteers, so helping nonprofits check in after this very crisis moment. How's our money looking? Do we have enough money to get through the year? How do we use that money in the most effective way? So I think that those pro bono consulting resources will be even more important in the next sort of 6 to 9 months as we end up the year. So I think that's it. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much for sharing. And I'm glad to see that there's still such a big support for nonprofits. That's a big concern. Next up we have a principal librarian from Pasadena Libraries, Tim McDonald.
Good morning, everyone. Just give me a thumbs up if you can hear me. Sometimes I have awesome.
Yep, I can hear you.
Okay, great to see everybody. It's nice to be here this morning. I'll give you a brief update on what libraries are doing here in Pasadena. Really two kind of themes have emerged. One is assistance with emergency response, and then adaptation of traditional library services. You probably all know Pasadena Public Library is part of the city. We are the Department of Libraries and Information Services. So whenever a local emergency is declared, all city employees assist with whatever emergency response is needed in the city. So lots of library employees are really working outside their normal functions in support of the city's response to the pandemic. So, I can give you many examples. There are a handful of librarians that wake up in the morning, turn on their sewing machines, and are sewing face coverings during the day. And those are all distributed to the city's emergency operations center through logistics support group, and find their way into the hands of essential workers around the city. We're supporting the housing department with their Project Room Key initiative, where we're trying to house as many people experiencing homelessness, get them off the streets, and protect vulnerable people from becoming infected. So a library security guard that may be working during the day guarding a library is now working the graveyard shift at a homeless shelter to protect those people. Library staff are assisting with the installation and maintenance of hand washing stations around the city. I think there are 11 have been installed so far. Some at partner agencies here on this call. There is a mobile shower at the Hill Avenue Branch Library 3 afternoons a week. That service provider, called Shower of Hope, has set up operations around the county, and the anecdotal feedback we've gotten is that the service here in Pasadena is kind of the best run, we're happy to say, and serving the most people. So the Pasadena is leading the way in that initiative too. Some library staff are reassigned to the public health department, doing the very critical work of contact tracing. And the library staff were kind of identified for their skills of good listening, information gathering, ability to keep things confidential, and they are the ones making the calls when someone is infected to find out who they were in contact with and follow up with those other individuals to make sure that they're being tested and quarantining themselves. You may have seen we've gotten some positive national attention for that. There was a story on CNN this weekend, and there'll probably be a couple more this week on some other news outlets too. So there's this theme of being involved in the emergency response, and then the second strand of, well, how are library services adapting to the current situation? And as you can imagine, we've had to be nimble just the way everybody else has. So a lot has moved online with identifying kind of the most relevant needs of the community. So there's a lot of wellness resources, a lot of support for families that are home together. I just direct you to our website or our e-newsletter to see what all those offerings are. Lots of cooking, support for job hunters. We're trying to update job listings on our website to direct people to local businesses that are hiring. And then we're piloting a curbside pickup like so many other retail businesses are doing here at Central Library, where people will be able to pick up books in our in our parking lot here at Central. Once we figure out how well that is going and iron out all the tweaks, we expect to be able to roll that out at our other 9 branch locations around the city. At some point, when the library doors reopen and people are allowed back in, we know we will not be at 100% capacity. We'll probably be one of those groups that are operating at 25% capacity. So we're looking at, what will we need to cut back on in terms of, and what will hours of service look like? So reaching out to stakeholder groups like our tremendous library commission for their advisement on what are the priorities that the library should be looking at. At this point, we do not have a date set for when the doors will open. We mainly have an online presence where people can contact us either online or by telephone for library services. I want to just note a couple of things that we're doing internally to kind of keep morale up and support staff. We've opened up kind of a pantry. In the early days when the supermarket shelves were empty, we set up a table where people could bring in kind of high demand items that were difficult to find, and it was just leave one, take one kind of situation, and that's still going on here at the library. We did a kind of a recipe sharing goof thing where people sent out the things that they're making at home and sharing those recipes with staff. And we do a weekly newsletter where we send out photos of what people are working on. We still have a presence in branches. People are still showing, most people are telecommuting, but a small number of people are still showing up to every library and working on all those behind the scene projects that need to get done anyhow, even when the public's not there. So there have been some facility improvements that we're really happy about, some new flooring that was really needed at a couple of branches, for example. And that's about it. I'll keep it short. If anybody wants to follow up with me afterwards, feel free to give me an email. It's Tim McDonald, just like the restaurant, McDonald at cityofpasadena.net. And it's great to see everybody. Stay safe. Thanks, Jeff.
Thank you, Tim. Next up from Pacific Oaks College, we have Dr. Elizabeth Chamberlain.
Hi, everyone. It's nice to see you. And it's just so inspired to see everybody speaking today, and just hearing all that we're doing as a community to come together, because really although we work in different entities, all of us working together mobilizes the support for our entire community. So it's been really inspirational to hear from all of you. And Jeff, since we work at the same institution, and I know you've been involved in a lot of our response, feel free to jump in if there's anything that I missed. But so I'm Dr. Elizabeth Chamberlain. I'm the Dean of the School of Education at Pacific Oaks. I'm one of 3 deans. We have 3 schools, the School of Education, which I oversee, the School of Cultural and Family Psychology, which houses our community psychology program and our MFT program. And then we have our School of Human Development, which has our human development programs at the BA and MA levels. And so we as an institution, as many other colleges and universities, had to figure out how to put all of our ground classes online. And for example, our MFT program is only offered on ground. It has never been offered in a virtual format or online format. And so we really had to look at how to mobilize support. So our approach was really to support the faculty that needed to have the tools necessary to teach their students in a new format. And so our Vice President of Academic Affairs, as well as our President, really worked with our instructional design team, as well as our tech teams, to make sure that everybody had the necessary tools, really to provide the education that our students have, entrusted us to continue to provide for them. We had to cancel study abroad trips. We had to cancel domestic and international travel for faculty and other students and staff. We had to cancel our Best Arts Conference, not cancel, we're postponing our Best Arts Conference. Our commencement is postponed, as many other institutions. We also had a lot of students who were displaced from their fieldwork and clinical practice experiences, which can really be disruptive for them. And so I'm going to share a little bit in a minute about how we've addressed that. And then, there's many different ways that we've been impacted as an institution. But I do feel like our president has done a phenomenal job of communicating with us, communicating with students, supporting the entire institution, as well as our children's school. We have a children's school. Many of you are probably sometimes more familiar with our children's school than even our college, but which is located down by the Arroyo. And so our teachers and staff over there had to be supported and have been furloughed for this time. But our president, as well as our HR department, worked to raise money to support them. Some of us gave up some of our vacation time so that we can support one another, people who were more impacted in the institution than others. We had students obviously who were impacted right away. They lost their jobs, their families were impacted. So as resources have been sent to us, we have sent those to them. And so our response has been really, our president again has just done an amazing job of assembling a task force to ensure that our students are supported, our staff and faculty are supported, that we do our best to make sure that they're staying safe, but yet can continue in their education and their work. So we have a website on our main page that you can go to and see all the different, wealth of information and resources there. Dr. Grant, who works with Jeff, has been a big part of that, leading that effort. And we have had our Vice President of Academic Affairs has mobilized support in the way of trainings and technology. As many of us, some people were more accustomed to online and virtual formats, and some people were not. And so we had to quickly get some of our faculty and adjuncts trained, to continue to work from home. And we had some students actually who didn't have the kind of Wi-Fi support that they needed. So different companies, we sent out information. We're providing like free hotspots, free internet, for a certain amount of time. So we had to really work to make sure that that was provided. We started having virtual town hall meetings for all of our schools to provide a time for any student who wanted to ask questions or express concerns to do that. So we've done that. I would say that, for many of us, it's like we've become Zoom masters and GoToMeeting gurus, the best that we can, as much as, sometimes glitches happen, but we've been meeting on a regular basis. None of our meetings, none of our normal, activities have been disrupted. We've just continued to move forward with using the virtual format. The area that's been most impacted, I would say, for students has been the fieldwork and clinical practice. And that goes for our MFT students who have moved to doing their clinical practice through telehealth, our HD students who Jeff and the Center for Community and Social Impact really worked with them. Many of them were displaced, but through the center, they were able to have fieldwork placements. The School of Ed that I oversee, so I oversee 2 credential programs for student teachers, and many of our student teachers were initially displaced. We've worked with our mentor teachers who, many of them were new, to any kind of technology. So we've really been trying to liaison between schools, mentor teachers, our student teachers to help them, to continue. We worked also under the guidance of the CTC, the California Commission on Teacher Credentialing, which has provided some flexibility for people coming into the teaching profession so that the flow of need is not disrupted in the fall. So they provided up to a year for some of those student teachers to get, to complete their requirements, including testing, because all testing was shut down. So that's just a little bit about, what we've done. We have CARES Act money that we're going to be distributing to students and, many other things. And we just appreciate the work that everyone is doing in the community. And, thank you. We appreciate it. And, thanks, Jeff, for having me today. I do have to leave early. I have another meeting, but it's been great to be here this morning. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing, Dr. Chamberlain. Next up, we have David Seidel from JPL Education. Talk about what JPL has been partnering with.
Sure. Good morning. I was going to suggest that one of the reasons why the crime rate was down was you didn't have 6,000 JPLers wandering the streets, but that. So the lab, my last day in the office was Monday, March 16th. At that point, JPL had kind of been following what was happening elsewhere with NASA, where there was a series of tiers and a response plan based on how much exposure had been and so on. So there have been some cases that have been linked to JPL, but isolated, not widespread. It's interesting when you have a situation like this where things that people told you were impossible, 2 months later, it's now best practice, and we're kind of an example of that in some respects. So the lab is somewhere around 6,000 to 7,000 people up at Oak Grove every day. There's about 500 or so that are critical in one respect or another that are still working. The situation is we've got a spacecraft in Florida right now that needs to go to Mars between July 17th and August 5th. Otherwise, it needs to wait 26 months for the chance to launch again. So that's a critical activity. And there's other missions that are in a similar state. So there are people that are continuing to work directly because they have to be either in Florida or at JPL to do their work. The rest of us have managed to pivot to remote work pretty effectively. So not everybody is as busy as everyone else, but we're standardized on WebEx. Somebody did the statistics, and we're during work hours, we're doing something like 350 WebExes per hour. And so there's a major connection that still gets maintained. On my last day, I walked out with a couple of vital things. One was the headset I'm wearing now. The other one was a large format monitor that really improved the quality of my life. But we've done a good job of making this shift. So as JPL looks to go back, there's going to be a hierarchy of who needs to go back first. And a lot of us, there's probably a few people that need to go back in a hurry, but the rest of us, it's kind of like, well, maybe not. And I think the future of work at JPL is going to involve vast expansion of a flex work policy that we already had. And people would be given a lot of choice and a lot of flexibility, and we've kind of went over the hurdle. Had we tried this 2 years ago, WebEx and the other tools, we use Slack and Jabber and things like that, just weren't available in the quality and quantity that we needed. Now in the education programs, we have about 1,000 interns over the course of the year each year. We had over 200 at JPL in March, and we were able to pivot all but a handful of them to remote work. So they could do writing and research and literature searches and things like that. There were a few that were hands-on doing bench work that couldn't be pivoted, but that worked out really well. Now, all of those students had a JPL badge, they had a laptop, they had credentials, and so it was just a matter of essentially working remotely as long as they had their hardware with them. As we look to the summer, our summer typically includes about 700 interns, and we're going to have about half of that. But the big hurdle that, again, would have been impossible, but now seems like no big deal, is the students can be brought on board without actually having to physically come to JPL or another NASA center. And they can get credentials on their smartphone that allows them to make a VPN connection into a secure cloud where they can get a virtual desktop on their own computer. So rather than you've got to come to JPL, you need a physical tangible badge, you've got to leave your fingerprints, we'll give you a VPN password, and here's the hard scanner can use. It shifted to virtual, and so we're expecting a pretty successful summer as a consequence, and then starting to think about the fall, whether we need to consider remote or some sort of hybrid arrangement. We have students in the greater Los Angeles area that potentially could come and go on an irregular basis, but a lot of our interns are coming from some distance away, and so Caltech housing isn't available, other kinds of arrangements, even traveling is something that may be considered unrealistic for students. So we're going to have some sort of hybrid arrangement, no doubt, as we look into the future. But it has changed the way a place like JPL operates and works, and a lot of the shift to remote work has been successful. That's been reassuring. The people in my team that are clearly under the most stress are the ones that have little kids at home. So when schools and daycare open, their lives will become a little more expansive, but JPL has also implemented a policy that allows a recognition where you don't have to work 8 or 9 straight hours. You actually can take a couple of hours off for childcare or whatever, and there's an administrative account that allows us to be flexible in terms of what people's realities are. So things are doing well at JPL, but it's going to evolve over the next few months and probably permanently in some respects in terms of the way we do work. Thanks, Jeff.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Next up, we have Inessa from College Access Plan to talk about how they've switched their student services to online.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. For those of you who aren't familiar with CAP services, I want to give you an overview of what our programs look like and how we've transitioned since the school closures. So during the school year, we offer free year-round college prep programs at PUSD high schools and middle schools. Our programs for the high school, our high school program is completely drop-in, so students just come by whenever they need support with college prep, versus our middle school and SAT classes. Students do enroll and are part of it once a week. And in addition to that, we have our alumni program, which we support over 500 college students. So since our services are very direct, we're very direct service-based, we needed to adjust to the school closures by still offering our curriculum virtually while also being thoughtful about any up-to-date tools that maybe PUSD is using with their students and being mindful of that, since many of them are limited to maybe just having Chromebooks and can't access certain features like Zoom. So our first and foremost, what we discovered is that many of our students had questions, so we pivoted into offering one-on-one meetings for all students and families on an appointment basis. So just as of last week, we've held over 205 appointments and reached over 90 students. That's not even including some of the families, to discuss any critical questions they had about maybe financial aid, college decisions, scholarships, and with our college students, many of them were adjusting to online classes and needed support and had questions around that. So we learned soon that obviously with one-on-one appointments, we aren't reaching everyone. So one strategy that we had, other than our one-on-one appointments, was to offer a series of webinar presentations for larger audiences. So whether that's been regarding any SAT prep updates, or letting juniors know how you can spend the summer from home and still make it worth your while and prepare for senior year. We've just had to be very mindful of some of their questions, heard what some of our students have expressed, and then offered it on a much grander scale to parents, families, and students. So it's been really great because we've had student participation, but we're also very aware that there's a group of students that we're probably not reaching because, you know, they may not have internet access, or they have their own, you know, personal challenges in their life, and they're just making sure that they're passing their classes is first and foremost the most important thing. So with our SAT prep class, this was one program that was very impacted because prior to school closures, we were in the middle of offering those sessions. After the school closures, our team worked to continue offering the class, but adjusting it to a virtual format. So this is officially our last week of that class. We've offered it once a week for 6 weeks. And the class mirrors our traditional in-person class. So each week, the instructor covers a particular SAT topic and walks students through sample problems. But the biggest takeaway from the SAT prep class that we will be incorporating into the rest of our curriculum, especially gearing towards fall, is the use of Google Classroom, which many of our PUSD students are familiar with. So we've taken Google Classroom, updated all our content on it. Students can access their workbooks. They can take diagnostic tests both during and after the class. And our instructor interacts with them through this format to make sure that each class is really dedicated to where that particular group is at. So it's been really great because we've learned that we've had to use, with our limited resources, we've learned that, one, we've printed a lot less, obviously, but the students are still getting the same information. And we can continue saving on resources in the future and then offering these classes to PUSD and other partners down the road. So it was kind of a blessing in disguise for us, because now we have both our SAT prep class for in-person and for a virtual offering. So that was a really great takeaway. And our biggest priority just leading into summer and fall is we want to be mindful of, obviously we don't know what the landscape is going to look like, but we want to make sure that regardless, we incorporate these blended virtual models with our traditional in-person services. So whether we have to incorporate more one-on-one virtual appointments, online classes, webinars, in addition to our drop-in services, we hope to work towards that, because by sustaining these offerings and using these essential tools like Google Classroom, we may in some ways reach more students and more families that would have normally not taken advantage of our program because of their own personal challenges. So next step for us is really just saying what PUSD's decision is going to be for fall, and kind of monitoring what we're doing as a response to it. So that's pretty much where we're at.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for the update, Anessa. Next up, from Pasadena Educational Foundation, we have Dr. Patrick Conyers.
Good morning. Thanks, Jeff. So when this crisis started, we at PEF turned our fundraising and staffing efforts toward assisting the district in different ways than we're traditionally accustomed to, knowing that students needed to be fed, that district employees and volunteers needed to be protected, and with distance learning, the tech needs that the district had were paramount. So we've turned our fundraising through a response fund that we've created toward those three priorities. We've helped the food services of the district by coordinating volunteers for the food distribution of the 7 school sites Monday through Friday. And as of last week, 120,000 meals had been distributed since March 16th. So that's obviously very important. We helped the district by funding 3D printers for all the schools a few years ago. And we pulled the 18 of those machines together at Muir in what used to be the auto shop, I guess now the automation shop. But we're creating face masks for food services, for volunteers, for custodians, and we'll continue to do that as long as there's a need. That's been pretty rewarding. And then obviously the tech needs. The district was out ahead in transforming itself to a one-to-one computer model with Chromebooks a couple of years ago. So they were ready for this transition, and I think that they've done that very well. There are needs that still need to be addressed, connectivity, hotspots, replacement of Chromebooks, power cords, things like that we are helping the district with our fundraising. And also, David Seidel mentioned WebEx. That's something that the district is doing too, but there's a bit of a disconnect between teachers and families in trying to communicate, because the teacher's email address isn't linked to their phone. So what we're helping fundraise for now is so that there can be a system so that when teachers are calling, even if they're calling from their phone or an app on their computer, the number that pulls up on people's phones is the school phone number. And that's actually been very significant in trying to connect with families and teachers, instead of it looking like some random number from Nevada or Connecticut or something. It's the number that they recognize. So there's more likelihood that if students aren't connecting with teachers, if they're not turning in assignments, that having that connection with teachers can be more effective. So we're really listening to our partners in PUSD and seeing what we can do to make a difference. We canceled PEF, our summer program, which is 1,600 students that we reached last year. This would have been our 16th or 17th year of the program. It was an incredibly difficult decision to make. We knew that we wouldn't be able to do it in person on school sites. That became pretty clear early on. So we turned our efforts towards seeing if we could put on a quality virtual program. And we were willing to try. And the more I just looked at it, it seemed like there were far more ways that it could go wrong than go right. Another issue that weighed on my mind was needing to reach the students that needed our program the most, and a virtual option for them just wasn't the best thing. So we decided not to go ahead with our summer program. We are creating content that we'll give away for free, either on our website or in learning kits that we'll get to those students that need it the most, again, for whom virtual learning might not be ideal, especially in the summer. So our efforts continue with that. Finally, I'll mention, in speaking with the superintendent, some of you might have seen reports coming out of Governor Newsom's office, the kind of impact that a budget deficit is going to have on the entire state, and specifically on public education in our state next year, is going to be severe and profound. Dr. McDonald, the superintendent, mentioned that the difference between the 07-08 budget and the 08-09 budget in the Great Recession was about $7.4 million, what that meant for PUSD. Looking at the numbers right now, and they don't know this for sure, but they're estimating somewhere a dip of 18 to 20 million is possible just for PUSD. So obviously, you know, that's going to be paramount to the work we're doing. We feel like we can make a great impact. I don't know that we have that sort of reach to be able to bring in 18 to 20 million additional dollars next year, but we'll be doing everything we possibly can. But it's going to be, the impact is going to be very severe on students coming out of this crisis, which hopefully we're able to do sooner rather than later. But that's it for today. Thanks, Jeff.
Thank you, Patrick. Next up from Caltech Education Outreach, we have Mitch Aiken.
Hi, everybody. It's good to see your faces virtually, and I'm really inspired by everything I've heard this morning. It's so much. It feels so good to hear all the wonderful things that are happening in our great town. So kudos to all of you. Caltech, like all the other universities, is trying to figure out what next steps are. We don't have summer school sessions at Caltech, so that has not been an issue. We do have, as David mentioned, there are a lot of interns that come to Caltech to either do research at Caltech or at JPL during the summer. And of course, all of the in-person versions of that have been suspended, but we do have, our folks who run those programs are actively figuring out how many of the research projects can continue virtually. So we will have a good number of students still doing these important, getting this important experience and doing these things, but from their homes. We don't have any housing available during the summer, of course, at Caltech because of the shutdown. But what we're looking at now, and we actually have a town hall meeting tomorrow where we'll all learn a little bit more, the Caltech employees. What we'll do in the fall, we're looking at different options of how we can come back to some degree, possibly having some students on campus. We're still sorting all of that out, but working very hard to figure out how we can return to some pieces of normalcy. A big issue for us in the Education Outreach Department is that all of our summer programs for K-12 students all the on-campus programs were canceled. That's impacted probably a lot of you who might, with your own kids, take advantage of the many programs we have. We usually have about 300 K-12 schoolers on campus on any given day during the summer, so that's a big impact not to be able to do that. One program that we are continuing is doing a virtual version of our Summer Research Connection program. that particular program brings high school students to campus for research. So we're looking at which ones of those can happen virtually, and I'm working with Christina and Brian, who are on the call, and PUSD on how we can match up students with the available programs we can offer, and dealing with all the PUSD technology and password issues and the things that other people have mentioned to see how we can make all that work for everybody. So that will be happening this summer. We're now recruiting the students and the labs that can virtually host them. We're still doing a couple things to round out the school year. We started a Facebook group. It now has 551 members. It's like a homework helpline group. It's called Ask a Caltech Student, and we've opened that up worldwide on the web, so anyone can register for that. And this is for parents and teachers, parents who are struggling with trying to help their kids do their homework, and the kids are way beyond the science and math and levels that their parents can help them with. So the kids can go on this Facebook through their parents and post questions about their homework, and actually have a Caltech student respond to their question, which is pretty cool. So that program's ongoing for the rest of the school year. We're still doing our visiting scientist program at Madison Elementary, though virtually. Our graduate students are developing pre-recorded modules of their hands-on demos of different science presentations, and working directly with the teachers on how they can support them with that. A number of our programs that were canceled do have virtual options. Our Project Scientist program for girls still has a virtual remote offerings, and ID Tech, and then Community Science Academy has a program for 2nd to 5th graders. So you can go to our website if you're a parent or know someone who's scrambling to find something meaningful for their kid to do this summer. You can check out those programs, and that's a quick wrap up of what we're doing. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Mitch. And yeah, really great use of Facebook. I saw some comments in there for the Ask a Caltech student. I've been sort of poking in on that every once in a while. Next up, we have Mary Donnelly Crocker talk about what's going on at Young and Healthy right now.
Morning, all. So Young and Healthy feels very, very busy, but for very different ways. One of the things that has been particularly challenging for Young and Healthy is that families don't always know how to reach us now because most of the access comes through the schools. So we are concerned that there are families, there's kids out there who aren't getting the health care they need because they haven't figured out how to access our services. We are open, although virtually. We are having someone check our voicemail every hour on the hour to see if anyone's called in and needs help. So that's something you can all do to help, is to let people know that we are actually open, and we're not in the office, but we can still help. One of the things that's tricky about all of this and the way we do referrals for Young and Healthy, everything you read about this pandemic says, if you're not sure, call your doctor. Well, of course, many of our families don't have doctors, right? So you can call us. And although we're not doctors and don't play them on TV, we can help troubleshoot for people and help figure out what they can do to get the services they need. One of the things we're really prepping for is that we believe that the part of our service that may get this huge boost, which is not a good thing necessarily, is in the fact that people are losing their jobs and are going to lose their insurance. And so when that happens, we are available to help them get on Medi-Cal or any of the Covered California programs. And we are doing that virtually now, and our workers doing that from home and getting people insured. So you can let people know about that as well. We too have shifted everything online. We're doing mindfulness projects on Facebook. We're doing Family Fridays where we're sending little helpful hints about living through this and helping kids cope with the stress of all of this. I'll be doing my first Zoom trauma-informed care conference in a couple of weeks with the SPA3 Health Consortium, and we're going to start to do that. One of the things that has shifted is that we have, at a couple of occasions, convened some meetings or been a part of other meetings where we really learned about some of the other needs in the community. And when we learn these things through our volunteer roles, we've been able to do some outreach in different ways. When we learned that kids were not able to do their online therapy or even their schoolwork because they didn't have headsets, we did a headset drive. I've gotten, I think, probably 3,000 toothbrushes and toothpaste delivered to my home. We've collected diapers and formula and other baby stuff that people need, and then we're redistributing those to our partners in the community. They're coming. Actually, my house looks like a shipping house because everything is shipped here now, and then we're redistributing it. One of the things that we're doing with that, every time we redistribute something, we're putting a little flyer in that says, "Hey, Young and Healthy's open. If you need anything, give us a call." So that's something that we certainly would not have been in the business of, collecting headsets before. But because that was a need that was really demonstrated, then we did it. So we are changing all of the things like everybody else. We're trying to figure out how to go back, when we go back, how we go back. And whether we are physically in the office or not, we're still open. And we want people to know that if there's a kid in need or family in need, has a health, even if it's not a health issue, call us. We'll help them figure it out. So we're still available, and we would love to hear from folks. So, thanks.
Thank you, Mary. Wonderful. Right, next up, Pasadena City College, we have Alex Bucklehide.
Everyone, good morning. Glad to see everyone on the call today. I feel like I'm on a bus tour of all the Pasadena organizations. It's really great to see this in five-minute chunks. I'll get right to it. At PCC, just to pick up the theme here, we are open for business. We have been since March 18th when we moved fully online, but clearly things have changed for us as well. We are now in the position of our summer schedule was released yesterday, which is also fully online, so we'll continue online instruction through summer. And then for our fall, we're considering a range of options. Obviously, flexibility is the name of the game. We're tending mostly towards what we might call a 90-10 model, where 90% of our instruction would be online, but the last 10% in those areas that have to meet face-to-face, the career education areas like welding and auto, and also a lot of science labs, it's difficult to do everything remotely. So we're trying to find ways to get some students back onto campus so we can keep that instruction going. Obviously in socially distant ways and spacing people out, and there's a lot of considerations there. So still working out the details of that, like everyone else on the call. I think the most important things I want to share today are just what we're doing for our students. We've been distributing laptops and hotspots to those who need them, both on the student side and the faculty side, since this thing came upon us. My data is a couple weeks old, but we've distributed more than 250 pieces of equipment to those students in that way. And that's just kind of helps students stay, engaged. One thing I'd be curious to learn more from others on a separate call offline is, as this continues to drag on, are there ways to provide Wi-Fi spots for our constituents and our students in socially distant areas? I hear of some places that turn their Wi-Fi towards the parking lot so folks can sit in their cars and, do work that way. We face a distinct need to get folks hotspot access, and in the absence of machines that do that and subscriptions, finding some sort of concerted response across the city would be helpful, at least for our population as well. So if anybody has any advice or knows anything in that direction, I'd be curious to join that conversation. We also are clearly a conduit for dollars from both the state and the federal government. The CARES Act came through, and we ended up with about $7.6 million in money to distribute directly to our students as a result of that. That is taking place. We've already distributed money to about 4,500 students, grants ranging from about $500 to $1,000, slated basically to need and basically based on need. We're holding some of that money in reserve for future distributions because we figure there's going to be quite some time where this is still going to be in our lives, and we don't expect additional resources to come from the federal government, but if it does, we'll be obviously prepared for that. We also are finding any other resources we have that we can turn into emergency funding, and have created a unified application service for students to be able to let us know what they need so we can get them resources right away. We've also been doing food distribution here and there, although we had to stop our own Lancer Pantry work. We have instead been referring students to resources from the LA County Food Bank because it's just hard for us to have the PPE and space required to be able to prepare food and distribute it to students in that way. I think the story for the past couple of months has just been one of flexibility and resilience. Our staff, our faculty, our students have all been under the gun to figure things out. and we've just been overwhelmed by the response. You know, we expected a lot of melt, students deciding this wasn't for them and moving on, and we've been pleased to see that the number of withdrawals has been less than we might have expected, substantially less. We've also seen faculty really pull up their, you know, bootstraps, if that's something people still have, and figure out how to deliver information and education remotely. So there's a lot of learning going on here and a lot of learning happening. We're here, we're open, we continue to serve, and we'd love to, you know, be able to help people out however is necessary. So we look forward to continue to work with you. Thanks for the time.
Thank you, Alex. And lastly, and the first person to join me online today was Juliana Hines from Planned Parenthood, Pasadena, San Gabriel. And thank you for waiting, Juliana. If you're talking, I think you're still muted.
Okay, there we go.
There we go.
You hear me now? Okay,
Yes,
sorry. So as an essential provider, Planned Parenthood has never been closed. We have relocated lots of stuff and moved stuff around, but we have been serving the community pretty nonstop. I'm gonna start on our health education in, which by the way, happy Sex Ed for All Month, everybody. We're deep in that. So we had interestingly already been in conversations with some folks in the foster care community about doing education online for youth who are in foster care, because they have just a lot of challenges, sometimes in adequately getting services in the school systems. And so we'd had some pilots. We've been already working with PUSD through the STARS program, providing some education for some of those youth. And really we're kind of, you know, we have the same challenges with online education that everybody else has. It's just more difficult to reach the students we need to reach. It's more difficult for them to feel like they're engaged as much. And so we're just trying to figure out how we can be a best support to the students who we can be, and particularly to all of the school districts in our service area. So we'll continue to figure that out. In the meantime, our youth development programs are going forward. We have our Peer Advocates program, which is high school students from all over sort of the greater Pasadena region. And they do projects at the end of the school year. And so for a moment, they were very concerned that they weren't going to be able to do their projects because they were very much involved in doing on-campus events. And so what they did is pivoted and moved all of their projects online, whether it's on Instagram or for PUSD, they did an LGBTQ+ inclusivity Zoom call where they got a hold of all of the GSA, the Gay Straight Alliance clubs on all of the high school campuses at PUSD, and gave them all an opportunity to join a call where they could just talk through what they were going through and check in with each other and provide support to each other. So we continue to find ways of doing that, and we are in the midst of recruiting for next year's Peer Advocates. And so I've got the bit.ly up there if you have high school students, and this is largely in the Pasadena, South Pass, Glendale, Eagle Rock, La Cañada, sort of like the western side of our service area. We will continue to do Peer Advocates online on Zoom for as long as we need to, and we are hoping eventually someday that Peer Advocates will return to an on-site program. In the meantime, we go all the way out east to Baldwin Park in our service area, and we're opening we opened a new health center in Baldwin Park, and there's an education center that's opening next door to the new health center that we were going to launch a second Peer Advocates program. In light of this, what we've done instead is decided to launch a digital youth advisory board that will largely be run through Instagram. It's mostly focused on students from the east side of our service area, although we'll see not impossible if for some students in the Pasadena area, the Digital Youth Advisory Board is a better fit for them, then we will make that decision as it comes in. And I've got the bit.lys to the application process for both of those programs. And if there's any other questions, I've got the the email address up if you have any questions about our education services and what we're providing. Moving on to community outreach and engagement. One of the things, since we can't do traditional community outreach, what we've done is we're trying to distribute resources as we have them. And through a partnership with the Pasadena Rotary last year, we have menstruation kits that are pads and tampons for people who need them. They're in kits that will last each kit will get you through a month. And so we've started passing those out, particularly to a lot of our partner agencies in the foster care environment, through Hillsides, through 5 Acres, Learning Works, Charter School, and PUSD we've provided some to. And then we also have community partners who are asking for safer sex kits as well. So these are condoms and instructions and information that we're passing out as well. So any community partners who are interested in getting those items, please let us know. And we're trying to continue to partner on that. We know how important the census is in making sure that we all are going to get the resources that we need going forward for the next 10 years. And so we're continuing our push. We've just moved everything online. We have a text bank that is constantly going on, and with the partnership of about 30 different volunteers, we've sent out over 59,000 texts to people reminding them to take the census. And we'll continue to do that and partnering with other groups to do a lot of paid online advertising and things like that to make sure we get an accurate census count. Somebody's phone is ringing. We're also continuing with our volunteer opportunities. We're trying to be very creative in how we move those all online. Obviously, our externships and our internships have been postponed for the moment, and so we'll get back to those when it's appropriate. But in the meantime, we're trying to find other ways that our volunteers can engage. Some of that's been through the census. We have a lot of staff appreciation things that our volunteers are helping us with. So we're just moving on with that. If anybody is interested, email us at volunteer@ppsgp.org. And then finally, for patient services, our health centers have been open. Prior to COVID taking place, we had already been working on some pilots for telehealth. We were thinking more in terms of site to site. So if one health center was short on a clinician and a patient at another health center needed to be seen, we could link them health center to health center. And in about 6 hours time, we completely threw out those protocols. We turned it to a patient to health center connection instead and started rolling out telehealth services. We were the first affiliate in California, one of the first affiliates in the country to turn to telehealth services because we had all of the equipment set up already. And so that's been very, very successful. We've seen, I don't have the latest count, but probably close to 2,000 patients through telehealth so far, doing everything from birth control consultations, prescription refills, UTI visits, HIV prevention, all kinds of stuff on telehealth. And then as it's become more safe to do so, we always continue doing the in-person care. We just had to really limit what we could do and make sure that we were social distancing in our health centers and protecting health center staff and patients, but continued. There's some things that you have to come in the health center for. You can't get it on a telehealth visit. And so initially we had limited some of the services, but as it's become safer, we started these specialty clinics as well. And so knowing that even in the midst of a COVID crisis, we've also had an STI crisis for several years now, particularly in LA County. And so there was probably close to a month where virtually no providers in Southern California or in the LA region were actually doing asymptomatic STI testing. And we know a lot of STIs are asymptomatic. And so we've been able to figure out creative ways at 2 of our larger health centers to socially distance and return to doing asymptomatic STI testing. The LA County Department of Health has told us we're basically the only ones, we're one of the few people doing it, and we're basically the only ones who are doing syphilis treatment at this point. So it's important that we continue that work. The mammogram clinic in Pasadena, the monthly mammogram clinic, had been put on hold. It will return later this month. We've we're figuring out ways to do all of this stuff. And then we had launched TransCare services about a little over a year ago that have been wildly successful and helpful to the trans community. And so we are returning our monthly TransCare clinics into being starting this month. I've got the website put up there. People can make online appointments, or they can call in and make appointments through our contact center. But we are open. There are very few services at this point that we are not providing. I think well person exams are about the only thing that we're not providing at this point. We've figured out ways to provide everything else safely. So with that, I just want to thank Jeff and everybody for bringing us together, and we will continue moving forward.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing. I do apologize to everybody that I sort of was a little ambitious in scheduling, so we went over a little bit, but thank you all for sticking around. I can unmute all. I mean, if anybody who needs to leave, feel free, but if we'd like to have a discussion, we can. I'd just like to, it's just amazing seeing all of the organizations come and present what an amazing community we have, and what fantastic resources we have, and especially really addressing the inequity that is in society, and stepping up to address that, and that as social distancing relaxes, that we don't go back to normal, that we've learned, that we take what we've learned right now and apply that, and really take some of what we've been addressing and make that the focus. So does anybody have any comments or questions before we end? Okay.
I actually do.
Yes, I do too.
Yes.
Oh, sorry. Well, first of all, it's so good to see everybody. I miss you all very, very much. And it's just amazing to see, once again, the amazing work that's being done by all the organizations in Pasadena. And I hope you all realize how extraordinary you are. And the one question I have, this has been incredibly useful, but do you think that you might do something like this for the arts and cultural organizations and the museums, particularly, you know, with probably the museums being the last to come into the reopening process, last phase, but we're facing really unique challenges in that many of us are hands-on organizations and are open to the public, and it's really changing the way museums and other cultural organizations are thinking about ourselves. So I don't know, the museum community has always been so terrific in Pasadena, and I don't know if there would be anything like that similar to this that you would consider doing. And if I could come.
You will definitely be invited, and I would love to. I think that's also the arts and museum institutions in Pasadena really make Pasadena what it is. And having an arts background, I would love to hear and find out, you know, what they've been doing, and you know what kind of impact. So yes, I'd like to convince. As long as we're holding these meetings, yes, I'd like to you know, branch this out into other aspects.
Great, thank you.
Absolutely. All right. Any other questions or comments? Or okay, Jeff, I see your companion has wandered off.
And for now.
Yes, Erica.
Do you have any idea when you'd like to have another meeting? I think this was just fabulous.
Yeah, I
comments that it's such an impressive community, more than ever.
Yeah. I wanted to see how this went. I think it went pretty well. Then maybe being a little more realistically on the timing, although we did keep it to an hour and a half, which is normal for City of Learning. But yeah, I'm going to start looking now into planning the next one.
And maybe a short Q&A, because there were, for example, questions I would like to ask Chief Perez. I mean, there were a few.
Right. Yeah. So I think I'll see what I've learned from this and try to build it in so we have specific time for Q&A after.
Very
each
white
one.
way to say Perez. Perez.
Yes.
Are we done?
Right. Well, thank you. And so I will send out a follow-up email with all the links and stuff in the presentation, and also a link to the recording in case you want to pass it on to anybody else that wasn't able to attend. And I'll start reaching out to other organizations to see what kind of scheduling we can get.
Thank you so much for organizing this, Jeff.
Oh, thank you.
It's been brilliant.
Yeah.
Be well, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.
Stay safe.